Why do so many cafes struggle to make money? When you see a busy coffee shop with a lineup of people paying $5 for a coffee that costs around $1.20 in ingredients, it seems like a money-making machine. So what is the problem? Why do so many cafes fail when they're selling a profitable product that people are literally addicted to? Well, in my experience, for a lot of cafe owners, it comes down to one thing. They don't know their numbers. Yes, I'm talking about financials, those annoying details that can bring down even the busiest cafe business. So today I'm going to give you a crash course in how these numbers work and show you the 3 key costs that can make or break every cafe business. Now, buried away in your accounting software or in the paperwork that your accountant sent you that you pretended to understand is a report that is really important to get familiar with if you actually want to make money. It's called a profit and loss, or P&L for the cool kids. Now, the P&L shows how much profit or loss you've made over a period of time, like a month or a year, and it's divided into 2 sections. The top section shows sales and gross profit. Now, gross profit is the profit we make directly on the product itself. Now, it doesn't factor in other expenses like labor, rent, or the repayments on the company yacht. No, those costs are shown in the section below the line. So once we deduct these costs, we're left with operating profit, or what is sometimes called EBITDA. You know, if you like wearing power suits. Whatever you call it, this is an important number because apart from making money, this is the number used to calculate the value of the business when you want to sell it. Okay, so that's a lot of jargon. What do we actually do with this information? How do we use this to make money? Now, for a coffee shop, profit almost always comes down to controlling 3 key areas: gross profit, labor, and rent. If you can't get these 3 areas under control, then all the other details usually aren't going to make much difference. So let's get a closer look at these 3, starting with gross profit. Consider the average cost for a cup of coffee that a coffee shop might sell for $5. For example, a takeaway flat white in a 12-ounce cup. Now, to start with, we need to deduct tax. In Australia, GST is 10%, so we divide by 11 to take that right off the top, and we're left with $4.55, which is the real price that we'll need to work with to calculate profit. Now, ingredient costs include coffee, milk, paper cup, and the lid. These are called cost of goods, or COGS, if you want to sound like a business pro. Now, in this example, based on typical ingredient costs, these add up to $1.24, which leaves us with $3.31 in what's known as gross profit. That's 73% of the price. So the theory is good so far, but the reality is that on the monthly profit and loss, you're not looking at one product, you're looking at a combination of all the products that you sell. Not only that, but there's always some products that sell really well and a whole lot of others that sell a lot less. So this pushes the overall gross profit up or down depending on the profit of each item. So if we take a look at the benchmarks from the tax office, overall COGS for coffee shops average between 35 and 40%. Now, it's not always helpful to work in averages because every business model and region is different, but ideally, I think best practice is to aim for a lower range, closer to 30 to 35%. So step 1 to controlling gross profit is to work out the profit on every single item that you sell. Yes, this can be time consuming if you've got a big menu. So my tip is to do this when you add a new product to the menu. Grab a set of scales, measure each ingredient, enter this into a spreadsheet, and then compare margins across your menu. Now, there's always a bit of a trade-off here. For example, if you're buying food items pre-made from a supplier, then they'll cost more than if you make them in-house, but you'll end up spending less on labor cost. The same is true with retail products like bags of coffee or bottled drinks. The percentage gross profit will be lower, but they're usually simple add-on sales that don't add to labor cost. There's no one answer I can give you on the right gross profit, but here's a quick hack I used when considering ready-to-serve food items like cookies or croissants from a supplier. I would start with the wholesale price and triple it. If I thought I could sell it at that price, then I knew I was in a workable range. It's a rough hack, so use with caution. Now, the goal of all of this is to get your overall gross profit into a healthy range. It varies by country and by business model, but my goal was to get it above 65%. If it drops below 60%, then it's going to be hard to hit a decent net profit for most coffee shop businesses. Now, at this point, a lot of people will go straight to cutting costs, finding cheaper suppliers and ingredients. And that's one way to approach it. But there's another quick and relatively easy way to fix the problem, one that doesn't compromise quality. You can increase prices. Now, I've met a lot of cafe owners who rarely increase prices because they're scared of losing customers. Ingredient costs creep up every year, eating away at their gross profit. but they keep holding off. Instead, my process was that I would adjust prices every year. So I would check competitors, and I would already be keeping an eye on gross profit, and then would simply make the change. No big announcement, no manifesto on how heartbroken I was, just inflation. It's a fact of life. Now I know it's not always easy, there's only so much you can increase prices, but holding off making the change is usually not the solution. No, that's not a typo. We really do spell labour with a U where I'm from. Whatever the spelling, what I'm talking about here is the cost of paying staff. This includes wages and salaries, as well as benefits and taxes. If I had to pick one cost that's the killer for most coffee shop businesses I've seen, this is it. First of all, it's a big cost. Here in Australia, it's common to see labour costs as high as 40% or more of sales. Now, this will vary by country and region due to differences in the minimum wage, but it's typically going to be one of, if not the biggest cost on your P&L. And the second problem is that it's really hard to manage. Now, unlike cost of goods, it doesn't automatically increase and decrease along with sales. For example, if you have an unusually quiet day, sales will be lower, but you'll also use less ingredients, so the overall gross profit will stay roughly the same. But if you've rostered the same number of staff as usual, you don't pay them less, you pay them the hours they work, and so your labour percentage will be higher, leaving less net profit at the end of the day. This is a problem. Many cafes simply run the same roster every week regardless of sales, which means that they effectively have no control over the biggest cost in their business. Now, the alternative is to write your roster to a daily budget. There are some great software systems that can help with this, but a basic spreadsheet can do the job if you've got a small team and you don't mind a DIY approach. So you start by entering projected daily sales and then start allocating staff to shifts. As you complete each day, you can see the expected labour percentage and tweak things until you hit your target. Okay, so I know all that sounds simple on paper, and sometimes there's no way to hit the number unless you cut staff to zero. But at least you know where the problem is and you can start addressing the root causes, like maybe you need to find ways to increase sales on these days, or adjust the service model or your menu so you can operate more efficiently with less staff. Occupancy is just a fancy way of saying rent, including the costs that are attached to it, often called outgoings. Now, for a coffee shop, this can be one of the biggest expenses, and that's because they're often set up in prime locations like street corners and shopping centres, which have really high rents. Now, paying more rent is not a problem on its own if that location helps deliver lots of customers. What really matters is the percentage of sales. So a good target to aim for an occupancy cost of around 10% or less of sales. For a new business, that percentage will usually start out a lot higher and come down as sales grow. But it's really important to know what you're aiming for, to have that in mind when you're considering whether the lease is worth it in the first place. Now, unlike labour cost, rent is usually a fixed cost. That is, you pay a certain amount every month whether sales are high or low. Now, some locations pay a percentage of sales or a combination, but a fixed rent is typical. That means if your occupancy cost is too high, then the only way to fix it is to increase sales. And speaking of increasing sales, it just so happens that I've got 10 cafe marketing ideas waiting for you in this video right here. It's okay, you can click it now, I'm done.